Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm back, and thank you for participating with Media Library. It's good to see so many comments, especially from the ones who are skeptical about everything. So, we're making this video on specifically what people have said and asked about, because we have this one particular gentleman, and I believe it's a gentleman, that believes that we're breaking the laws of physics by not calculating the power equation. Okay, so again, we're back with Chat GPT. We are using 4.0 because I'm pay for the service, and we want to go over that power equations so you understand the circuit in which we made doesn't break the laws of physics or that equation. Okay, so let's get into that.
It sounds like you're delving into some complex aspects of power conversion and the role of components like DC-DC converters, MOSFETs, and capacitors. Let's break down your questions and statements. 1. Power equation, P equals VXI. This equation holds true universally for electrical circuits, where power P equals voltage V multiplied by current I. It applies both for input and output sides of converters. 2. DC-DC converter operation. A DC-DC converter, like the one you described, 120 watts, input 36 to 40 volts, output 12 volts at 10 amps, steps down voltage while boosting current for efficiency, not exceeding input power. When reversed, input 12 volts, output 36 to 48 volts at 3/8, it steps up voltage while lowering current. 3. Role of components. MOSFETs. These semiconductor devices can switch large amounts of current with minimal control voltage. Faster switching can indeed increase output current, but it does not create energy, it only controls its flow. Capacitors. In voltage doublers, capacitors store charge and can double voltage by alternating charging and discharging cycles. They do not multiply current. Current is limited by external factors such as load resistance. 4. Understanding power conversion. Voltage doublers. These circuits use capacitors and diodes to increase voltage but do not increase current. They store energy during charging phases and release it during discharge. DC-DC converters. Efficiency is key here. They adjust voltage and current based on circuit design. They do not multiply power, instead they redistribute it efficiently between input and output. 5. Conclusion. Power equations apply universally, but understanding component behaviors, like MOSFETs and capacitors, helps optimize designs. MOSFETs control current flow. Capacitors store energy but do not increase current. DC-DC converters and voltage doublers use these principles to achieve desired voltage and current levels efficiently. In summary, your understanding of how these components work together is on track. MOSFETs can amplify current through fast switching, and capacitors can double voltage but not current. These principles help in designing efficient power conversion systems that adhere to the laws of electrical power.
Okay. If you guys are following me, then you start to understand that I understood this. And I understood this when I was a young kid messing around with these components and stuff. This is how we made overunity. This is why I go bonkers when people keep saying it breaks the laws of physics. But when you're listening to their version of overunity and my version of overunity, then you see the difference. Now, when I talk to professors and stuff about my work, their suggestion is I just change the name. Give up on the name because the work is good. But it was my name. It was overunity belongs to me. And I kept holding on to that. Okay? Now, despite what we're talking about over unity and all that, and I'm only bringing that in for reference because we're talking about switching. I'm saying that there's a correlations between how I came up with the equations for over unity and what we're talking about today about MOSFETs, voltage doublers, that they have similarities in all of it, even though they're done for different purposes. And it's how I can create these circuits in which we're talking about today. Okay? So if you don't understand these principles, which I believe a lot of people would in my last video, they thought I was getting it wrong. And I wanted to talk about that because we're taking voltage and amperage from two different places. One, we're getting amperage from a battery, and two, voltage from the solar panels. Now, if you didn't watch all the videos, you're not going to get it. Of course, you think I'm going to be uh, messing with the laws of physics, which means that I'm not doing this right. So let's draw up some diagrams here. Hold on. Okay, we got a little drawing here that should help us out. Okay, this is my circuit. Okay, this is a charge controller and it's MPPT. Okay, this is another charge controller, one of those cheap charge controller. I think it's called a PWA. Okay, which has a battery. Okay, now what we didn't put in this circuit, which we can draw another little square up here, is actually solar panel, SP. And that's going into this circuit of mine. Okay, so here's what we're doing. When this turns on, it takes the amps into this circuit and it divides it. That means it stops the voltage because this is at 12 volts. Okay, and knocks that away. So it just cuts that away in the circuit. Okay, and it lets the voltage come up through this circuit and just put the voltage. So if this voltage is at 36 volts, we now have the amps because the voltage here doesn't apply. Just say that it has 20 amps. Okay. Now, as it goes through this circuit, it then puts it into this charge controller, which gives us the power we need to charge things like our equal flow and stuff like that, because we're going to get that from another component, the inverter. Okay, this has electrical, well, that's good enough for an electrical plug. Terrible, isn't that? Okay. It looks more like a socket. So electrical socket, that's where we're going to get our power from. Okay, and we can just plug our equal flow on there and get it from here plus the battery. Okay. Now, so people know, we have two types of solars. We have solars on the outside and these are on the in. Okay. Now, so at nighttime, it runs this system. This system runs from batteries. Okay? So it's limited. But we only need to get through nighttime. So we can get daytime power up here. Can we get that in there? daytime power up here, these solar panels, and go back into charging this whole system in which we set up. So we're not saying or trying to eliminate solar power. We're trying to help the system out by taking artificial light and taking that solar, putting it in here because we get full voltage, the 36 volts for those two solar panels. If it's at 18, if it's at 7, it's a little bit lower. 17 is a little bit lower. But whatever, we take the voltage from these solar panels and the amperage from this battery, and we cycle that energy, so it's going in a loop. And even though it's going in a loop, the energy coming into this, because here's another point that we're trying to do, is that we got to take another jumper cable and attach it to the outside solar, okay, which replenishes this battery, okay. So at nighttime, this just does not work. So you can say that it's off automatically, day and night. It comes on daytime, goes off at nighttime. This circuit, so we understand that we don't have to worry about turning it off or not. So in the bottom part of this circuit, this sends the energy of the battery into what we call MOSFETs. Okay? MOSFETs act different, but they work similar to a voltage doubler. We're talking about switching. And because of that switching, they kind of act like capacitors. If people were going to describe that, a MOSFET will hold in its gate. Okay, let's put G for gate. And then you have the source and the drain. I keep forgetting the exact order. But we have the gate. That gate holds power. Okay? When you energize it, it holds it just like a capacitor. Then when we have energy coming in, it adds to this gate, and therefore that's how we get our extra, or we can't even say extra. If we say extras, people's gonna get on my case. Let's say that we're adding to it. So it's boosting by just taking the same power, say 1 amp, and it keeps drawing in 1 amp, which goes into a diode, which doesn't allow backflow, so it can only flow in one direction. Okay, but it's still at 1 amp. That doesn't mess with the power equation. So the gentleman that kept telling me, please, please, the power in question doesn't have anything to do with it. It's just letting this in, and because it's stopping and starting and stopping and starting, which is a switch, it causes to have this go step up to or amplify to 2 or more amps. Okay? That's how a MOSFET works. And we're going to go over a lot of that in this segment. Okay? So now we understand the diagram. Okay? We understand we can take energy off this from the inverter up here. We understand that we got solar from the outside, and we understand we got solar coming in on the inside of this. And we have solar panels that goes into a circuit which does what? Switching, which is my famous thing because that's what overunity has to do. What is the symbol of overunity? V over 1, which I believe they tried to take or make a meme by making this equation the flux capacitor, which this works on capacity, on capacitors, and it fluctuates. But again, whether that's true or not, we understand that it has 2 points and we have equations on how that works and how we made the assumptions of over unity, because again, this has to do with back and forth switching and a power source, which is a source. Let's put a P on there so we don't think that's solar panels, but it comes from power and source of energy, and then switch it back and forth, which this new circuit uses that principle. Okay. Again, we don't want to go into my circuit because I know people want to steal it just like they stole over unity. But none of this breaks the laws of physics. Now, if you still believe in the old way of over unity, where you have what? A glass of water, and somehow it mysteriously adds energy into that when you start to pour it out. You get extra. That is what the scientists are saying is impossible. Just that little thing. So the energy must come from somewhere. So you have to put something into it to get something more out of it. That's all they're saying. And if you don't, and it's just the energy in there, and all of a sudden you get double as you pour it out or you take it out, that breaks the laws of physics. So they're not going to listen to you despite of what you're saying. Well, if we do this, if we do that, and it was like, that's the reason why the power equation we were just talking about is so very important. Okay? So you should be able to see that we're not doing what this is called. Okay? Whatever this is not over unity, because this is a lie. This is keeping you from circuits like this. Okay? We're taking energy from somewhere. And we're telling you that it has a limit, because when that battery runs out, this circuit stops working. But we are replenishing this. That means we run things in cycles. Okay? And I tried to make different types of books to explain the different things like cycling energy, all that kind of stuff, over unity, and that we can get different sources to bring into one. So everything that we're talking about is not breaking the laws of physics. So that answers that question. Now let's go back to AI and listen to how the similarities of switching is. Because the more you understand this right here, or with this symbol I made, okay, once you understand this, you're going to start making all types of circuits, okay, based on this evidence right here, because you're not breaking the laws of physics. Okay? You can manipulate this any way you want to, because you are getting the energy from sources that are known. Okay, so let's go back to AI.
Certainly. Although MOSFETs and capacitors serve different functions, you can draw some parallels between how they operate within circuits, particularly in terms of switching and energy handling. Here's a comparison to clarify the similarities and differences. Capacitors and voltage doublers. Capunction, function, store and release electrical energy. Voltage doublers use capacitors in conjunction with diodes to increase the voltage. The capacitors are alternately charged and discharged to effectively double the voltage. The key here is the switching action. Capacitors store energy and then release it in a controlled manner to achieve higher voltage output. Switching mechanism. Capacitors in a voltage doubler circuit are switched in and out of the circuit by diodes, which causes the capacitors to alternate between charging and discharging. This creates a higher voltage at the output compared to the input voltage. MOSFETs and switching. MOSFETs function act as electronic switches or amplifiers, controlling current flow between 2 points, drain and source, based on the voltage applied to the gate. Switching. MOSFETs switch rapidly to control current flow, allowing for efficient amplification or switching of electrical power. Fast switching enables MOSFETs to manage high currents and voltages, effectively controlling power delivery in various applications. Switching mechanism. MOSFETs switch current on and off rapidly, which allows them to handle higher power levels by controlling how much current flows through a circuit. The speed of switching influences how efficiently they can handle and amplify current. Comparison. Switching action. Both MOSFETs and capacitors involve switching to manage energy. Capacitors use switching to alter voltage levels, while MOSFETs use switching to control and amplify current. Energy handling. Capacitors handle energy storage and voltage adjustment through switching. MOSFETs handle current flow and can manage high power levels by switching rapidly. Application. Capacitors in voltage doublers increase voltage by storing and releasing energy, while MOSFETs control and amplify current, often used in power supplies and amplification circuits. Summary. The similarity lies in the switching action. Capacitors in voltage doublers switch between charging and discharging to increase voltage, while MOSFETs switch to control and amplify current. However, the mechanisms and purposes are different. Capacitors adjust voltage, and MOSFETs control current. Understanding these principles helps in designing efficient power conversion and amplification circuits.
Okay. I mean, you can't get it any more direct than what it is saying here. If you took this to an electrical engineer, he would say it's totally 100% correct. Okay? So let's understand when we're talking about switching, okay, whether it's done with batteries or capacitors or any type of electrical energy, and let's add in any source of energy like water, wind, fire, okay, earth, even, then all of a sudden, what Nikola Tesla is telling you, understanding that principle, you start to do stuff they think is impossible. Okay? They only say this because they know it is possible, because you can design and create circuits to manipulate what you need it to do. So let's say if we took Nikola Tesla's Earth energy circuit, okay, even though he was putting this in the air, it came from the ground, okay, and it's so weak, which the scientists basically say. Do you start to see that if you can do what a max generator do, or says to do, that means that you're using resistors and capacitors to get to a higher level of voltage, and you stop the flow of going backwards, you can only go forwards. All of a sudden you could take something very low voltage and make it very high voltage. Then you have other mechanisms besides MOSFETs that can increase amps in the same way. Okay? This doesn't break the laws of physics. That means the power equation still applies. It's just applied differently. Is because you're using the source of flowing energy from the source itself into the circuit. And because of timing, you get to these higher states of energy. I learned that early on when I was learning from a teacher who was teaching us about lasers. And they were teaching us how a laser went from one photon to two photons, okay? By getting to that higher energy light or photons, the light becomes from current to current. I'm pronouncing that word wrong. Let's say from unorganized light to straight flowing light. Okay. And it had to go from a lower state energy to a higher state energy. Okay. Again, Nikola Tesla was spot on when he's talking about alternating. Okay. And in alternating, they're not creating more power, they're just utilizing it in a more uniform way to get to achieve a certain principle or to a certain level out. And I've been trying to get you to understand that. That's why I said I'm going to make my own math, which had to do with over unity and the principles. And all my teachers were going bonkers because they thought you can't just make this up. And I was like, but why not? It tells you what the system is doing, and I can name each component. Later on, professors said, yeah, that's you can do that. You named each component, what it does, what it represents, and the numbers mesh. That means they are correct when you add them all up. So again, changing the name just confuses everything, even though everybody wants me to change the names because they deemed that word over unity that it's wrong, period. Even though, guess what, not one person has wrote a paper besides me. No one has did a review or a scientific review or just a review, whatever type of review they do in the scientific papers. None have ever wrote about over unity. Okay? So that's funny how they can make all these opinions if it doesn't exist in science. But they have opinions about it. That lets you know that it's stolen technology. And if they claimed it as they said they were, that someone owns it, who? Tell me who. So I can sue them. Okay? Because I have proof and evidence that's documented, even though it's not known, it's documented that it belongs to me. Enough of that. Now, this circuit, let's get back into talking to AI and understanding the circuit in which we were talking about without giving my ideas away. Okay, let's listen to the AI as it explains complexity of my circuit and whether is that feasible for you or not to do, because that's what it's going to be, it's arguing with. So
Given that you're using constant artificial lighting, which provides a stable and consistent power input, the setup considerations change slightly. Here's the revised evaluation. 1. Battery with MPPT charge controller and inverter. Setup, artificial light, MPPT charge controller, battery, inverter, EcoFlow. Advantages, energy storage. The battery stores energy, ensuring that the EcoFlow can be powered continuously. Stable power supply. Even though you have a stable input from the artificial lights, having a battery helps in managing any potential surges or dips in power demand. Disadvantages, complexity and efficiency losses. Additional components, battery and inverter, introduce complexity and energy losses in each conversion step. 2. Direct inverter to MPPT charge controller without battery. Setup, artificial light, MPPT charge controller, inverter, EcoFlow. Advantages, simplicity, fewer components, and less complexity. Reduced energy losses. Direct conversion from the charge controller to the inverter means fewer energy losses compared to charging and discharging a battery. Disadvantages, no energy storage. Even with stable artificial light, if there's any interruption in power, or if you need to manage load spikes, having no battery could be a drawback. Revised evaluation based on stable input. For stable, consistent input, Since the artificial lighting provides a stable input, the direct connection of the inverter to the MPPT charge controller is feasible. This simplifies the setup and avoids the energy losses associated with battery storage and retrieval. Considerations: ensure that the MPPT charge controller and inverter are compatible and can handle the power levels you require. Check that the MPPT controller can provide a stable and sufficient output voltage and current for the inverter. Summary: direct connection, inverter to MPPT without battery. This setup is likely better given your constant artificial light. It simplifies the system and reduces energy losses due to fewer conversion steps. Battery setup: while it provides additional reliability and energy storage, it adds complexity and may introduce additional losses that aren't necessary with a stable power source. Given the stable nature of your artificial lighting, connecting the inverter directly to the MPPT charge controller without a battery is a practical and efficient solution.
Okay. It argued because it doesn't want you actually to do this. They want you to keep with the norms, get your energy from the sun. But when you start saying, oh, how do I overcome low lighting or energy at nighttime? Then we manage it with the very applications everybody keeps selling you. Okay? It's funny how they're arguing with this when they're selling you an EcoFlow. And when the power goes out and it's at nighttime, what do you power your systems with? The battery. So if I have batteries that do specific things in my system, I'm just utilizing the stored energy in which I got from the sun in the first place. But I have to utilize it in a manner that's more efficient. And this is what the circuit does. Because it's saying that, look, I can charge that EcoFlow faster at higher amps if it can handle it. Okay? So this is what we're talking about. And it's so much to go into it with this circuit that I can talk to you about that they really don't want you knowing. Because once you understand that the things I was talking about is not talking about making more energy. What it's talking about, because of switching, is allow it to like step ladder, like you climb a ladder. Okay, you take one hand and then you put the other hand, you put your one foot up and you put the second foot up. Or you can symbolize, if you can't realize that image in your head, look at it as riding a bike. When you're pedaling, one leg rests as it goes up, and as you push down, that's called the power stroke. Okay, and then the other leg takes over and does the same thing, power stroke, and then rest. Okay, so when you put that into circuits, that's called overunity, because it's all one unit, and you're going over to the other side to put in your power, and while letting the other side rest, that means gain energy at the rest state. And now you have this idea of saying, if I do this, despite of what you want to call this, it doesn't break the laws of physics. Now, what can we do with this? Okay. And this is basically saying that now I can get to higher levels of energy. So, how did everybody mix this up? More power out than in. Okay? Well, dude, you have this power coming in, and it may be 1 amp or 1 volt, but because of the switching, it's taking that power, holding it back, and then releasing it at a higher power, because you have two circuits in there that store power, and then all of a sudden you got that extra power because it charged up at a higher level. If you don't understand that, go look up voltage doublers. Go look up how a MOSFET actually works and why it amplifies amps. Once you understand this, you can start utilizing what I've been telling you over unity successfully without breaking the laws of physics. Now, why do they don't want you to know to do that? Because you'll start taking the small amounts of milliwatts from Earth and other areas like the sky, which is known technology, but they say it can't power in because it's too low, and start applying these principles to this and bringing that up to useful energy. And it's governed by time, which so happily doesn't apply to electricity. They just take that all out. Time, even though it takes time to charge a battery or time to discharge a battery, time is not put into the equation when it comes to electricity. And when you add that back in there, which over unity does, that's why we say, look, when you understand V over 1, okay, then you start to understand all source of energy. All source of energy. Matter of fact, V over 1 explains on how a ram pump using water works. Okay? Again, I can explain this all day long. We can go over it step by step, but only what you do what you did last time. Communicate. If you throw your hands up and say this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, you are the one that don't learn something new. You end up learning this stuff so late in the game, it's not even funny. Okay? For the people who catch on and they listen and they say, okay, what about this and what about this? We both learn and grow. I'm just a librarian. Okay? I'm not a master electrician, even though I invent a whole lot of things. It's not even funny how many things I invent. But my job, which I do every day, is answering questions. Now, isn't it funny that people say things so you don't communicate with me? At the end of the day, what people's rumors and uh, be safe, don't talk to this guy, they tell you this is because I'm telling you things outside that matrix. They conformed. And if you ever get a hold of that information and start testing it, you start to see that you can do stuff that they don't want you doing or they would have told you. Okay? I have people who email me, okay? Not many. And one day I have to put some of his emails up and some of the things I answered because he was trying to control the system in which I was giving him with conventional systems. So he's using this power conversion, okay? But when he's saying, okay, you got this solar, but I can't get the amps out of it, he couldn't. So therefore, when he did his equation, he was like, I don't see how you're getting more power. But then again, when I start telling people, look, you're going to get your amps from a different source. And guess what? You don't necessarily have to get it from batteries. Okay? It's other ways that is producing amps, but I didn't want to go into that because that tells the secrets of my circuit. But the battery was the beginning of getting amps out, and I could show you the circuit. Did anyone go back to the other video and look at the circuit? how it was designed, it was very simple, very easy. It didn't get many views, but the whole point is it explains over 3 videos on how this energy is actually getting its power and its voltage through the circuit, through how the source of power comes in and out of the circuit, okay? And how we can, that's one thing that we didn't explain. We didn't explain on how you can actually make amperage, okay? That's one thing that I discovered from Nikola Tesla, going through his work and stuff. Hey, how did you get this? Voltage is very easy to make, okay? Amperage is very hard to make. But let's take, for example, if you want to get amperage, okay? If you take an inductor, that means you take a wire and wrap it around a coil, and you put just voltage into that, which turns it into an electromagnet. At the point you do that, you instantaneously start making current. That means amps. Okay? Now, would you ever see a circuit like that besides the ones I make, where you can just take a bunch of those coil wires and just take the low amperage and start adding those amperage up? They don't like doing circuits like that. One, the reason why we're doing this circuit with the MOSFETs is that it does the same thing, but it heats up. That means it turns super hot. It's wasting electricity. That's what they tell you. But if your electricity is coming from solar in the first place, why is it a waste to get what you need to run the applications that you want to run? Okay? Let's stop here and we'll go in it more. Please send messages, texts, what's names. Try to understand where we're coming from so I can answer your questions specifically. And I'm applauding and giving thanks to the people who raise these questions so I can make these videos and explain these things so it doesn't break the laws of physics. I hope that helps you out. See you in the next video. Forgot to add one more thing to answer the question, which I'm going to put his reply up here. Okay. It kind of corrects if I made a misstatement, but you'll understand how it got misinterpreted or I said it wrong. Okay. First, we have 2 solar panels, which are 17 volts. These are the 2. Sandwiched between LED lights. This equals to 34 when put in series. Since this is one solar panel, since we're taking this as in one, because we make a sandwich out of this, think that's the bologna, and these are the 2 pieces of bread. Now, when you put it together, how many sandwiches do you have? 1 sandwich. Okay? Now, because we have 1 sandwich and we have 2 of these sandwiches, we now have 68 volts produced because there are 4 panels, but they become 1, and they're all 17 from 4, meaning if it's 2 of these, that means that we get 4 of these equals 68. Okay, 68 volts. So you take 68 volts, and let's show you how we get to that number, 68 volts, which is more than this can handle because it's only taking 48 volts. It means we have to do something to knock it down to 48 volts, and that's just a simple circuit to make sure it doesn't overload this. And anytime you step things down, you put extra amperage through this. And how much does it give out? There's your number. There's your number. Let's see if we can blow that up. What? 120 watts. Your question is now answered. Thank you. Beautiful. And just in case I didn't mean this mean in any kind of way, I just wanted to state that just in case people take my words wrong. I'm just devoted to my job, and we've been doing this for 30 years, so we have done these calculations so we do not break the laws of physics.